Hello, everyone. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and hearing what the panel and I have to say. I think you'll find it interesting, and I just want to say I am so happy to stand on a stage and be in person, seeing everyone. However, for all good reason, my colleagues have reason to not be here today, so they'll be virtual. Nothing to do with COVID, so good news. But a big thank you to U.S. Dry Bean Council as well. These folks have gone to a lot of work and a lot of effort to make this happen, and I appreciate it. It's great. So that said, I'm going to show a few things for you to think about. We've got 3 panelists with us today as well, and I'll introduce them in a little bit. What I want to talk to you about today is at the apex of a more sustainable planet is a well society, both economically and physiologically. Much of that is driven by responsible foodways. With that in mind, it's important to consider that change really starts with all of us. We can't expect higher bean usage unless our innovation drives visible pathways to that change. We're going to talk about some things in our session today that hopefully will give you the ammo, the stories, the things to talk about that will help drive that change and, of course, drive that innovation. I love this quote. If everything seems to be under control, you aren't going fast enough. That was by the famous race car driver Mario Andretti. And of course, that made sense for him. But I think for us in the food business, it also makes sense. Change is so difficult, so hard to drive. In manufacturing, it causes change in machinery, it causes change in supply chain, and it causes change in the supply and sales process, marketing, public relations, all those things. Not simple, but it's worth it. If you look at foods with high protein and the organic and natural offerings, they still are the strongest out there of most often ordered. And at the end of the day, that's what we're concerned with, is how many people want to eat our product. Not surprisingly, driven by the younger generation at higher rates. And this is going to change. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to be more interesting. And it really is going to be what drives our future. If any of you out there have teens in your families or no teens or work with teens even in colleges and universities, you know that these folks are intent on driving great responsible pathways to a more sustainable globe. But food is very complicated. I'm 50 years in the food business. There's always something to learn. And many times when it comes to nutrition and nourishment and the value of food, it's not easy to quantify what that value really is. So I made something up. I made an equation that takes the two things that are sort of really very consistent in the world of nourishment, meaning that, you know, all kinds of fats, there's all kinds of carbohydrates, there's only a couple of kinds of fiber, and really protein is basically protein. But if you take those things and you add the fiber and the protein together and you divide those by the calories, then you get a score. And I think these kind of communications are critical in helping our end users, the people that want to eat our products, understand the value associated with a given product. Now, it's also important to note that you're going to see some scores here in a minute. And don't forget, I love all food. This is not a conversation about villainization. This is just to say that from a standpoint of protein and dietary fiber, where do the scores land? So, chicken, we'll just say chicken, is a 19. Pretty good. very valuable. We know that animal protein is very valuable to our diet and certainly the nourishment situation of foodways. Potatoes, mind you, again, I love potatoes. French fries may be my favorite food in the world. Gets a 5. Flour, good old wheat flour that we need for great cookies, cakes, deep frying, batters, all types of things, sauteing, gets a 3. Rice, one of the most eaten substances on the face of the earth, always in the top 5, depending on what stats you look at, gets a 2. So, thusly, many times it's paired with something that's way more valuable. I think you all understand what that might be. It's very interesting when we think about, out of this group, what really gives us the highest score. It's beans. Rice and beans, very powerful, 32. One of the tastiest things that there is and occurs in so many cultures. So that's good news. With those things as part of our thought process, I think it's really good to go ahead and talk about what the stories are that may help as we tell our end users, our suppliers, all those sort of things, those folks involved in the foodways, the stories that are so important. When we think about improving the global foodway, it has to do with sustainability and nourishment. We know that the global syndemic, as the medical community puts it, is built from malnourishment and, of course, sustainable processes. Beans play a huge role and have a huge potential in improving food supply. However, we have to show people the way. Adoption is key, but not easy. Globally accessible and economically practical, that is beans. They are something that fits in most budgets and, of course, relatively available all over the world. They're highly versatile. They're a great thing to cook with. You just had some at lunch. The other day we were at the market here in central Medellin. 3 or 4 different bean dishes we tried, all different, all similar in their own ways, and all delicious. Of course, part of the story is grown in the U.S. in great volume and super interesting variety, like many countries. But I think certainly we're here to talk about U.S. food supply of beans, and that is formidable. Today's work is to give you some stories, and we have some great folks on this panel, and I am going to let them talk in a couple of minutes. We want to talk to the value of beans, and we want to hear from these industry end users, and they're all experts in these subjects, to really help us understand how do we get adoption pushed forward? What is needed? We're going to hear impressions from folks at Department of Defense, school meals, and even restaurant chefs. All 3 critical for very, very important reasons. We have here fueling forces that need great power. We have school meals, feeding children that need food, and also teaching them about the product as they eat. And of course, we have my original heritage, the restaurant chefs. The people that cook these foods every day, that interface with people that drive change, and of course, make things ultra delicious, helping the profile and proving that a product is worthy of being part of the food supply. We also want to talk a little bit about how food is viewed and how nutrition can be achieved. With all that in place, I would like to bring virtually my colleague, Dr. James McClung, Chief Military Nutrition Division, Chair of the U.S. DoD Food and Nutrition Subcommittee, and as well, U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. This gentleman has some great opinions, He also told me, I asked everybody to tell me what you're going to talk about. He's going to speak to optimal nutrition being paramount for warfighter health and performance. Warfighter nutritional standards are developed to assure optimal nutritional status in all environments. And remember, that's big, varied environments. And guided by contemporary evidence. Very important. Such standards inform Department of Defense menu planning and the insertion of products into buyer's guides, which are utilized to procure these products and their high-quality ingredients and foods for the forces. Dr. McClung, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You're muted, sir.
Be here with the team today. As Brad indicated, optimal nutrition is critically important for the Department of Defense for a couple of reasons. One being the health of our warfighters, remembering that our warfighters are often young people, and the nutritional habits that they learn at an early age carry through life and preserve their health, as we are responsible for their health care throughout the lifespan, but also their physical and cognitive performance. And so we're critically interested in the nutrition that beans have to offer as we support this endeavor.
Thank you very much. And you know, those were easy words. They're very complicated, actually. And so I've been involved in many initiatives with the military, with DOD and OSD. And it's so important, that idea of cognitive and physical performance. So really, really interesting stuff there. Next, we have Amelia Christie Miller, the founder of Bold Bean Co. Really a very fascinating group. And she says, Bold Bean Co. is on a mission to make people obsessed with beans, raising the value and profile of the importance of beans to our food system. And when she speaks, you'll hear her talk a bit about how this happens. The more we can integrate beans into our food supply, the better we'll be with regenerative agriculture and other sustainability practices, as well as having stronger health and nutrition. Adding delicious, sustainable nutrition to our food supply, restaurants and chefs play a key role in this space. Amelia, give us the info.
Hi everyone, so nice to be here and at BeanCon. As a lot of people call me a kind of crazy bean lady, it's amazing to be around lots of similar people. But yes, I am the founder of Bold Bean Co. We are on a mission to make you obsessed with beans by giving you the best of beans. And we supply beautiful beans cooked to perfection in glass jars. And we've really premiumized this category, which is unheard of, really. We're trying to show it as something aspirational and exciting, not a compromise from eating meat, not a compromise from eating gluten. And that is what we try and do. We do that through our kind of really exciting marketing. For any of you wanting what we call Beanspo, which is bean inspiration, please follow us on Instagram. We're called Bold Bean Co. on Instagram. And what's really brilliant about that is that just kind of shows how we really are trying to do this from a 360 approach. We're trying to show people it's not just tasting beans cooked really well, sourced really well. It's also seeing them in a dish that they haven't seen before. Red beans are not just for chili con carne, and that's what we're trying to prove. So follow us on Instagram, check it out. And yeah, really happy to be here today. My background was working with sustainable food systems. So my love of beans came from my realization that they are here for our food future. And it's just brilliant to be here around so many people who share that view.
Thanks so much, Amelia. And her work is really cool. You should definitely take a peek because it's a critical piece that chefs play today in bringing foods and food practices forward. I'm sure you've all been exposed to that and understand it. So really, really interesting stuff there. Next, we're going to hear from a longtime colleague of mine. I don't know how many years now, and I probably don't need to say that anyway. So Kathy Powers, and she is a partner at Culinary Nutrition Associates. They do some really super work with school feeding. And chair of CIA's, that's Culinary Institute of America's, Healthy Kids Collaborative. Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Brad. And likewise, I'm delighted to be here. I'm a lifelong bean lover. And similar to Amelia, I have a mission to help create bean lovers with children across the United States. School meals play a critical role in the health and learning for Americans' children. On this first slide, you see that over 30 million lunches are served each day in our school meal system, and over 14.7 breakfasts are served daily. In many communities, if not most communities, this is the largest food service operation. Some school districts serve 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 or more students each day. And that's by far the largest food service operation in their community. And they do this, they serve hundreds and hundreds of students each day in less than 2 hours. Now, the one point that I really wanted to drive home today is that not only are school meals important for learning, but they are also the healthiest meals that our children are getting. This is a study. It was titled Trends in Food Sources and Diet Quality Among U.S. Children and Adults. And it was published in the JAMA article in JAMA in April of 2021. And what this study found is that among all the food sources, whether it be grocery stores, restaurant, quick service, college and university feeding, or schools, schools provide the healthiest meals amongst all food sources. So it's really validates the direction that schools are taking today. Now, on the next slide, we see that beans and peas, dried legumes, play a critical role in school meals. Every school meal must offer 5 components: fruit, vegetable, grain, protein, and dairy. Beans, in the vegetable group, there are 5 subgroups. You have red-orange vegetables, dark green, you have other starchy, and you have your dried beans and peas. Each one of these vegetable subgroups must be served each week. So it is regulation that beans are served to students each week. It's fortunate too that beans can also be part of the protein group. So beans get a double hit in school meals. Now, I want you to think about something. Think about a food that you might not really like. And that may be traced back to your first exposure to that food. Think about it. If a student's first exposure to beans is not a positive experience, we may have created a bean hater. We need to really focus on the quality of foods that we're serving so that we're creating bean lovers from the early age. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Kathy. And so Kathy, and that was really, that's a very important part of the presentation there. You know, and to recap that, school nutrition programs play a critical role in helping create bean lovers from an early age. So important. Kids are in school to learn, and food is part of that learning environment. So if we focus on that, it's very key to those young people. Eating habits develop at an early age, super important. School nutrition programs, as Kathy pointed out, served 30 million meals each day that nourish kids across the country and, of course, educate them what good food looks like. So now I want to go through each of our panelists and throw some questions across that'll help them elaborate on their expertise. I'll start with Dr. McClung. So, Doctor, would you tell us a bit about the perspective of USDOD and the importance of nutrition to the men and women in uniform?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Brad. And as we alluded to earlier, from the Department of Defense perspective, optimizing nutritional status is paramount for two reasons: assuring both the health and performance of our warfighters. From the health perspective, nutrition is critical for maintaining what we call medical readiness, meaning a healthy and deployable force, and for preventing many of the comorbidities associated with poor nutrition, including obesity and the development of diabetes or other diseases and disorders as our population ages and enters Veterans Affairs. This is important for the health of our fighting force, for which we care deeply, and also for lifetime medical costs, which become the responsibility for the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs for those in uniform. Nutrition is also critically important for both cognitive and physical performance, which are essential as warfighters endure occupations with very unique requirements, such as extremely demanding tasks from both a cognitive and physical perspective.
That's great. And, you know, it's so important to remember the role that nourishment plays in all of these environments that we're going to talk about, even from the standpoint of Amelia's particular expertise in the restaurant world. So, Amelia, given that chefs are key in driving consumer desire for food, how do we help chefs to advocate and serve beans in key roles?
So a bit of background. So what I kind of think is really important here is both chefs and home cook chefs. I think so often we think about restaurant chefs and they are so critical because the home cooked chefs are often influenced by the restaurant chefs. But I kind of think my view is that to create real change in consumers, in people, is to make something cool and desirable. And I believe that happens through, you know, the people at the forefront of our food culture, which is chefs and kind of foodies and people who talk about food a lot, essentially. It starts there and then it becomes mainstream. And that's definitely been our approach with trying to make people obsessed with beans. I think that the more a chef, you know, a chef once said, the more you love food, the more interested you are in the kind of the system that provides it. So I believe that any good chef, it's inevitable that they will come to beans at some point. It's just how quick it takes them to get there. So I think the more that we speak to chefs about the sustainability benefits of food, yes, they do care about health, but minimally, they're flavor driven. So what they would care about more is a world where we're having to drink, you know, Huel in 20 years time because we can't farm anything. That's what they're scared about because they love food. So I think trying to demonstrate the role beans play in our farming system can really engage chefs with the importance of using beans. And then on top of that, I think it's really about giving them, you know, there are so many varieties of beans and so much to be excited about. And just if you kind of can give chefs great ingredients to work with, you know, they're the best at demonstrating how delicious beans can be. And I think that as they're marching towards this kind of more plant-based future, they still want to cook with real ingredients. They don't want to be given a kind of ultra processed slab that they have to cook up and put in a bun. They want to be creative because that's what gets them going. So I think showing chefs how beans can be creative, you know, we talk about beans as pasta, which any Italians find very sensitive, but it works. You know, people love butter bean puttanesca and white bean cacio e pepe. And I think just pushing forward these ideas which help people reframe beans is really crucial in that exciting chefs and foodies, and then ultimately exciting everyone.
I think that's great. It's also important to remember that in the chef world, chefs, of course, learn from other chefs, right? So as higher profile chefs or chefs with better marketing capabilities have the ability to work with beans and talk about beans. Other chefs in the military, in school food service, in college and university, in all the sectors get those messages and they understand that. And of course, there's learning that takes place there. So super important. Kathy, so really from a general perspective, kind of two parts. How do kids learn about food? And using that knowledge, how do we really get beans to be a desirable, craveable part of school meals?
Great question. Thanks, Brad. Children learn about food through exposure. It's through repeated exposure. Some studies suggest that a student has to be exposed or a child has to be exposed to a food 7, 9, 12 times before they begin to like a food. So it's continued exposure to new foods that will create those beginning habits that then develop into lifelong habits. You can't expect a first exposure to a new product for the student to absolutely love it. So we need to just continually offer a variety of bean products so that the student has multiple exposures. But it's more than just exposures. The food has to be great too. And we've moved in school systems across the United States from a heat and serve model to really paying more attention to the preparation. And there's a variety of preparations that we can use with beans, from hot to cold to roasted. But also, we need to pay attention to the seasoning of beans. You can't just open up a can of beans, heat it up, and expect it to be craveable. You have to pay attention to the seasoning. And this comes with needing to train school nutrition professionals on proper cooking techniques, proper seasoning, and so forth. Just as professional chefs in restaurants are trained, whether it's on the job training or at a culinary school, school nutrition professionals need trained as well. And there's really a strong movement beginning where we're putting more emphasis on training school nutrition professionals in culinary skills.
Absolutely. And Kathy, that training piece is a huge, important piece. And so even, and I've been involved 4 years, particularly in my tenure with the Culinary Institute of America, in training military, all forces, about how to cook, how to make things taste good. Super, super important, of course, to those folks as well. Dr. McClung, can you tell us a bit about how the meal requirements are developed for our forces? How do protein and fiber play a key role? And maybe some of the real aspirations for what the military is looking forward to improve food supply.
Sure, Brad. So as with many things in government, meal requirements for military personnel are guided by DoD policy. There's one policy that outlines nutritional standards and requirements, otherwise known as the Military Dietary Reference Intakes, or DRIs, as you know them in the civilian community. For the most part, MDRIs are similar to the U.S. civilian DRIs, but they're adjusted to meet the unique demands of warfighters. Iron may be one example of that, particularly for our female warfighters. There's a second policy which guides menu standards for what we call garrison feeding. You may know that as feeding in a cafeteria. Finally, items and ingredients that may be procured for use by military personnel appear within a buyer's guide. The buyer's guide is developed and refined to align with both the MDRIs and a set of menu standards. You mentioned protein and fiber. Of course, protein and fiber are both key nutrients. Protein for maintaining lean body mass. In military personnel, we oftentimes have a unique situation during which our personnel experience negative energy balance, which can result in the loss of skeletal muscle mass. And also fiber for maintaining gut health and for its potential benefits to the cardiovascular system. Key aspirations for improving the food environment in our personnel include the provision of both healthy and palatable food, which personnel will choose to consume, as my colleagues have mentioned on this call, even when surrounded by unhealthy options in the civilian community or at home. There's a number of programs. One's called Go for Green. These impact both menus and education within our dining facilities. These programs are continuously improved as a part of the quality of our nutrition environment.
Very, very, very important. And you said a couple of things that are really key. And one of them is to drive choice, right? So if we put great food on the table and people don't choose it, great food sits there. And that, of course, is a challenge in every sector, but particularly in the military. And I think the upcoming challenges that will be there for the military is Gen Z moving in as part of the new recruits and their views and their things that make them say, this is what I want to be a part of. So really, I know our forces are all looking at that and thinking about that, but excellent info. So Amelia, in your space, how do you think that we can really push the versatility of beans? How does that play out in your area?
Well, our most viral TikTok video was, "You will never eat roast potatoes again. Try roasted butter beans." And it was probably the most viral because people are very triggered by being told they'll never eat roast potatoes again. But I think what really captured people's attention was, wow, I haven't thought about roasting beans in the oven with olive oil and garlic and rosemary, and they just hadn't thought about it. And obviously, I'm sure lots of you have tried it. It's delicious, it's crunchy, it gives you all of that, but you can feel a little bit good about yourself because you've got that bit of protein in there and all of the health benefits of beans. So I think that is one, thinking about, using a bean as a starch replacement, such as mashed potato, sausages and butter bean mash, that works, And then on the other hand, I think it comes from a culinary perspective. So what we're trying to do, we've just launched red and black beans, which we're very excited about, having just started our range with chickpeas and white beans, butter beans. So we've got these new beans, and where we've seen a lot of potential in using these beans and getting people to see that it's not just reserved for Mexican cooking, which is the general perception in the UK at least, is we're trying to actually show that these beans can be used in, red wine ragus. If you take the color of a bean and think about which foods are rich. A lot of dishes that you make look rich because they taste rich because they look rich. And I think that we make this beautiful ragu with mushrooms, a sofrito, lots of red wine, garlic, and red beans, and it is really next level, and you wouldn't guess that there's no meat in it. And I think showing people these new kind of beans jumping into new cuisines. For example, our black beans, we love them with miso and soy and moving into Asian food. And of course, the soya bean is huge in Asia, but actually getting to see that beans are so versatile, they can come into any kind of cuisine, be inspired. They're a neutral, balanced deliciousness that you can add and season in so many different ways. So I really think it's about getting it out there and making sure, we are trying to lead that way on our social media strategy, on our website with the recipes that we do, because that is delivering on our mission. And if we're all on the same mission, I believe that everyone should be doing that, trying to get people to see new and interesting ways of using beans and constantly pushing the boundaries when it comes to it.
I think that's so true. And I love the dynamic that we got going here, because we go from military regulations to TikTok videos that go viral. And it's really true. They all play a role. And then we've got Kathy with the young people and the school messaging and all that. So Kathy, and just to remind our panelists, we have about 9 minutes till we go into Q&A. So we'll spin through a couple more questions. Kathy, how can beans be more readily acceptable for large-scale use in school systems. And remember, we're talking about 30 million meals a day. Go ahead.
Well, I think first I mentioned we need to focus on training with the school nutrition professionals. Second, I think we need to build up resources available. And particularly, I'm thinking about recipes. While the professional chef in restaurants aren't driven by recipes, in schools, they're critical because one, they provide the formula that folks have to follow, and two, they ensure that the students are receiving what they should be receiving. So we need to provide a greater variety of recipes. But also, I think we can innovate in the forms of beans that are being made available, potentially looking at more IQF beans, potentially dehydrated beans that have been cooked and then dehydrated so that they're easy to prepare in schools, so that they don't have to spend a lot of time cooking them. Thinking about how to educate professionals on seasoning beans, on different flavor profiles that you could use with beans. There's no bean less appealing than just opened out of a can, drained, and put on a salad bar. We need to really innovate and create just craveable foods for our students.
Totally. And I think it's so important for us that drive the supply chain at the top of the supply chain to remember that the more that we provide insightful innovation, the easier adoption becomes. So with that, Dr. McClung, the last question here from our perspective, can you give us a little insight on how folks that really want to think about getting things into the military systems, a couple of bright spots that you believe are important?
Sure. So first, I'll go back to a point that I was making earlier in that we're thinking about health and performance. And so, as we've discussed, beans support good health in armed forces meal due to the high concentration of macronutrients, right, such as protein and fiber, and also micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals. This is critically important for us. You asked about how we decide where to buy food products, and that's done through continuous review and revision of the standards that I described earlier, our recipes, our buyer's guides, but also warfighter acceptability. So when something meets the health and performance standard, warfighter acceptability and palatability are important factors to think about. As I leave off and we head into question and answer, I just want to remind the group that it's important to note that food products are available in a number of forms or formats within the DoD. This includes our operational rations, which have unique shelf stability requirements, garrison or cafeteria dining facilities, but also grocery stores. Remember that we have grocery stores that are available to our military personnel, which is a place where beans can and are sold. All of these locations engage in continuous improvement plans to maintain healthy options such as beans.
Fantastic. Great info. Thank you, sir. Now, Amelia, what do you think is going to be super important about the commercialization of a product in order to increase consumer awareness? And I think just to push you in the direction, I believe it has a lot to do with how we talk about it.
Yes, exactly. I think that for so many years, people have been apologizing for beans and saying, oh, you should eat beans because they're really good for you. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. And the reality is, I think we've learned, sadly, from, the last 100 years, people should do a lot of things. It doesn't make it work on a mass scale. And that is kind of what I see brands playing a role in. I use the brand Oatly as a great example because Oatly, whatever you think of them, they have managed to get a bloke I went to university with ordering an oat milk flat white and then going home that evening and having a cheese toastie. So they're not dairy free. they could have milk, and they've chosen to go for Oatly. And I think what's clear about that is Oatly managed to make oat milk desirable. So people weren't having it because they felt good about themselves or it was healthier. Those were reasons to believe, yes, but they were having it because they wanted it. And that is what we're doing at Bold Bean Co. We're making people want beans. We're never apologizing. We're never saying, oh, you should eat our beans because we're full of, all these great, wonderful things, which they are, of course. We're saying, eat this, it's delicious, everyone loves us. Like, why are you not eating beans? They're the world's best food. And I think being unapologetic and uncompromising in your kind of communications about beans, part of the reason why I think it's worked is because people aren't used to hearing beans spoken about in this way. So they kind of find it entertaining, which I love. I love that tension because it makes it more noisy, and people hear about us more easily because they're so surprised by the approach we have as a brand.
That's great. And that's it is the paradigm, right? It's make sure it's good for you, but make sure first it really, really tastes good, right? I mean, that's the key. And I love the social media piece that you all do as well. Kathy, if you set all the rules for the schools, and certainly you're actually qualified, so I'd vote for you. I think, what would you say to folks to really help them permeate that market? It's not easy.
No, it's not. It's certainly a challenge. You have students who come to your cafeteria every day who maybe never had a bean at home. And we're introducing these foods and expecting them to eat it. As I mentioned, school meals are the healthiest meals. And they're coming to schools having had quick service restaurant meals, having had restaurant meals, having had pizza, ready to serve meals at home. So, they're coming with different taste profiles. And in the school, we're watching the sodium, we're trying to, add more vegetables. And these are new things for the students. The biggest piece at that age is one that we're exposing them to a variety of products. So it's important that we serve beans in a variety of ways, whether it's a bean dip, whether it's roasted, like the roasted broad beans. That's one I'm going to try. Thank you, Amelia. Or roasted chickpeas, whether it's served cold in a cold salad, like a Tuscan white bean salad, or whether it's served hot as a barbecue 3 bean salad. We have to expose students to a variety of beans in a variety of ways so that if they don't like it this way, maybe they'll like it this way. And again, I think the industry can help by providing easier, faster preparation techniques with the dehydrated beans and IQF beans, but also guidance with innovative recipes. And as I'm listening to the others speak and some of the ideas that Amelia has shared, I see that it's a real balance between kind of the traditional ways we've served them and really the innovative and creative ways that we can serve them.
That's super. Yeah, I think it is. And I'd love, I think that truthfully, we need to get the school food people to adopt some of the regimented practices from DOD and put some rules in place. I think that would be great because they're actually fascinating processes that they have to drive food forward. So I want to just take a sec to thank you all for sharing today as we go into Q&A here. And we will be happy to take questions from folks for our panelists, for myself, or you tell us. So let's go from here.
Bueno, ¿alguna pregunta? ¿Alguna pregunta? Ahora sí, ya, perdón. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? Manos arriba, por favor. Ok, gracias.
Okay, Paul Newnham from Beans is How. So one of the things that, thanks, Amelia. One of the things I was thinking about as this conversation was going on was a question around language. And I think there's very different language being used to describe the same thing. And I'd love just any reflections on the language and the appropriateness for different audiences. But what can we be doing better in terms of language to communicate beans to different audiences to get them to eat more?
Yeah, I think, Paul, is that for Amelia? Yeah, so Amelia, get started, and if you all want to jump in, feel free.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I think that every kind of audience is driven by different motivations. For example, I started falling in love with beans because of learning about their sustainability benefits. And I know that's a huge reason why you started Beans as How as well. But for example, our power users and the people who really connect with what we're doing as well are, a demographic that was slightly older, who are far more driven by health. They're kind of over 60 and worried about, high blood pressure. So I really think that it's about a 360 approach. And I don't think that anyone, we don't have to lie about beans. That's why we're so lucky that, the gut health professionals in the UK are already pushing beans, whether we want them to or not. The champions in farming are already pushing beans, whether we want them to or not. So it's really about kind of building credibility from all of these professionals. And on top of that, just making them more fun. And I think one of the things that really kind of I find fascinating is digging into the history of beans and why they were persecuted for so long. Because when you understand what has led us to the current situation we're in with the industrialization of farming and the associations of eating meat as being more wealthy, we don't live in a lot of places, in the Western world, you don't have it's very easy to access meat, and we're actually trying to reduce the meat access. So we're living in a different world, and still people are not recognizing that actually our consumption habits can change, and therefore our perceptions of beans can change. So I think once you learn about where that comes from, it can help you see that beans were a huge oversight in our diets, because it makes sense why we haven't appreciated them, but now it's even more so, let's appreciate them because they're the best.
That's great. Thanks. We have other questions.
¿Alguna otra pregunta por acá?
Necesito
¿Alguien?
preguntas.
No? I don't
No,
think so,
we're
Brad.
clear. Oh, there's
Here
one.
we have another.
Hi, I'm Eco-Chef Tom Hunt, and I'd just like to know what your first memory of beans was as a child or young adult, and what brought you to love beans, especially Catherine.
I would love for Kathy to hit that one.
Well, that's a great question. And, you ask many folks what their first school meal was, and they'll be able to share many details, or what their favorite school meal was, and they'll share a lot of details. Or, you ask them to talk about their school lunch lady. And many times, adults remember their school lunch lady more than they remember specific teachers, because these folks follow the students from kindergarten on. I'm very fortunate to have come from a food-loving family. So we had a variety of foods growing up, and beans, of course, were an important food. My mother is also a registered dietitian and understood the importance of the nutrition of beans. But I think for many of us, our earliest memories are around holidays or special occasions, whether it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or the 4th of July in the United States. And for me, I think barbecue baked beans was probably one of the first memorable foods for me.
That's a good
Thanks
one.
for the question.
No, that's perfect. And I want to grab that one too. So I can go back. Most of my family is from Texas, and my earliest memory, and it is very early, is trying my grandfather's pinto beans that had a bunch of chilies in them, and he would have a plate of those with crumbled stale cornbread on top and chopped onions. So that is, I can taste it now, very, very early on. That's a good one. We could talk all day about this. Any more questions from folks?
Any questions? No, but
No?
I'm going to add something. Thank you, Brad.
Please.
Bueno, tengo el gusto de conocer a algunos de ustedes. Soy Raúl Caballero, trabajo con USDBC en México y quiero comentarles que tenemos una iniciativa, una alianza, se llama Alianza Leguminosas, en donde tenemos muchas recetas y queremos invitarles a que las visiten, las pueden utilizar libremente ahora que debemos de hacer una promoción del consumo de los frijoles con más fuerza, y la página es www.alianzaleguminosas.org. Los invito a que entren y bajen las recetas. Están disponibles y libres de uso. Gracias. So what I said is, I'm inviting them to the Pulses for Health Alliance initiative that we have with the USDBC, where we have a lot of recipes, innovative recipes that are not tagged to a specific cuisine. So there are a lot of international recipes that, can fit to these ideas of promoting and moving the beans into the center of the plate and not on the side.
Great. So, quick thing to remember, delicious food gets chosen, right? So that is key. Dr. McClung and Amelia and Kathy, thank you so much. A lot of fun, good messages. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.